Well, the old saying goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. For America, the two adversaries are joining forces to wage war against our Western culture. And as Michael Youssef explains, there's only one way to win this battle.
Judeo-Christian values are under siege. Free speech is under attack. And our country seems to be more divided than ever before. Michael Youssef is a social and cultural expert. He's also the pastor of Church of the Apostles in Atlanta, Georgia. He says there are destructive forces in and outside our country, attempting to silence Christians and destroy America's founding principles. In his book, The Hidden Enemy, Dr. Youssef takes a look at the biggest threat to modern-day civilization and highlights the steps to build a brighter future for us and the next generation.
Well, joining us is Dr. Michael Youssef, and it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Good to see you again, Gordon. Thank you for having me.
Let me ask you a question that's been puzzling me, and I really have a hard time understanding why what I'll call secular humanists or liberals or even feminists seem to want to protect radical Islam, and I don't understand.
Not protect, but work together. They have kind of formed that unholy alliance, and they welcome each other. I know from the secularist point of view, they want to show that they are diverse and that they are really tolerant and not like these intolerant Christians. The problem is tolerance that comes out of fear is not really tolerance. It's just it's doing it so that because you're afraid of those jihadis. It's like the former president of the BBC said. He said, we can beat on the Christians because they have broad shoulders, but if we say anything about Muslim terrorists, they're going to show up at Oxford Street with guns and weapons.
Well, I just don't understand it intellectually, because when you live in an Islamist country with strict enforcement of Sharia law, there's no such thing anymore as democracy. There's no such thing as freedom of assembly or freedom of speech.
Absolutely.
You can be charged with blasphemy on a whim.
That's right. In Pakistan, it happens all the time.
Indonesia, a sitting governor was put in prison.
That's exactly right.
A long prison sentence for saying Muslims can vote for Christians.
Right.
And that was
simple thing like that.
That was considered blasphemy. But it doesn't seem to ever get, and then you just take women's rights in the Islamic world, where you can't drive a car. There's no right of education.
Exactly right.
These things, I just don't understand intellectually how they hold the position.
You put your finger on it. You cannot really understand it intellectually. It's impossible. Because even in the feminist rallies that they've had in Washington, D.C., right after Trump's inauguration, the main speaker was Linda Sarsour, a hijab wearing, Sharia calling for America. And she said, Sharia is the best thing for America. And so these ladies coming in there, and you say, you have to scratch your head. But as you said, intellectually, you could never understand it. These two people could, the polar opposites. And that's why I have many thinkers in America calling me and said, you know, I understood this and I understood this. I never put the two together. But spiritually, you can. If you remember so many times in the Old Testament, Israel would have two enemies. And the two enemies, like, say, Babylonians and the Assyrians or whoever, and they literally be at each other's throat. But for some reason, they will conspire, they work together. They form that unholy alliance in order to attack Israel. So from a spiritual point of view, it's the only way you can really understand this and make sense of it. That because, as Psalm 2 said, the nations rage, and they can unite together raging against God's anointed Messiah and his followers. And that's what really is happening. You have to have spiritual eyes to see this, because in the natural mind, it doesn't make sense.
Well, I think you're onto something, because it does seem this alliance, particularly in Britain right now with the Labour Party, is not just targeting Christianity, it's also very specifically targeting Israel.
Exactly. And they now, even churches, it's very hard to find a church in England. There are very few who are standing with Israel. Very few. And I'm talking about evangelicals and the Bible-believing churches. It's become fashionable now not to do that. But what the Conservative Party does, and I go to England quite a bit because we have an office there, have a ministry there, and I was meeting with some prominent citizens of Britain one time at a private dinner, and I said something about, well, you know, here in your country you have at least 100 Sharia courts. One of them stopped me. He knows what's going on. He said 200. 200 Sharia courts in England. But what does the Conservative Party do? They saw the Labour Party reaching out, not just to any Muslim, because there's some Muslims who are really in their mindset. I tell people I spent with a few other evangelicals 3 hours with President Sisi of Egypt. And he is against the militant Sharia people more than we are. And so I
know. I love reading his speeches.
Exactly.
When are we going to take it to heart?
I told him, I said, I read I listen to every one of his speeches on my iPad. And he smiled. And I said, you know, you're a man who kept your own word when you said at the cathedral, Christmas 2015, that you will rebuild every one of the churches that burnt by the Muslim Brotherhood better than before. You did. Every one of those 148 churches you rebuilt. I said, Mr. President, you kept your word. And I believe with all my heart you're God's gift not only to Egypt but to the region. And so I'm speaking as a person who understands the difference between political Islam and Muslims. Look at the Prince of Saudi Arabia, the Crown Prince. Been visiting the United States for 3 weeks. The interviews he's giving. And he's warning America, saying, the Muslim Brotherhood, they're going to take over Europe in the next 20 years unless you do something. That's, I mean, you have, again, they have to have spiritual eyes to see that God is doing some things that are just beyond our ability. I tell leaders in Egypt that if it wasn't for Sisi and for God raising him up, you could have had 15 million Christian refugees like you had in Iraq and Syria, if the Muslim Brotherhood stayed on, with the support of the Obama administration. In fact, they've been investigating now that the Obama administration gave them billions of dollars to succeed, the Muslim Brotherhood government in Egypt. And they're opening an investigation.
Why didn't the American public wake up to that? I think he telegraphed it in his Cairo speech, and it's a famous speech, but very few people have read it.
What he did is more than the speech. He insisted on the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood be sitting in the front during his speech. Mubarak said to him, Mr. President, this is an outlawed organization. He said, I don't care. I want them to be sitting in the front. And that immediate telegraphed to the Muslim Brotherhood, hey, it's free for all now. You can do whatever you want. I'm going to support you. And they have recordings of him, Morsi, the Muslim Brotherhood president of Egypt, and Obama talking, and his full support of him. He had Muslim Brotherhood, card-carrying Muslim Brotherhood members, just as Hillary Clinton did in the White House. And Hillary, her right-hand woman, parents are card-carrying members of the Muslim Brotherhood. And so when you think about this blindness, it's got to be a spiritual blindness. They cannot see the danger. They cannot see. No, if somebody will open a door, I don't care if they are Islamists, militant. If they want to talk, I'll talk to them. But to put them in charge of the national security, they were in the Homeland Security. Number 2 and 3 men were all Islamists, and their writing is very clear. And so this whole blindness that comes from the secular segment of our society is really the most dangerous thing, because they're creating the vacuum. And another group I'm going to tell you in a minute, creating the vacuum, making that very ripe for Islamists to move in, to fill the vacuum. But the Christians are also creating the vacuum. In Europe, when the Christians departed from the Christian faith, churches turned into museums and monuments. Look what's happened. Who's filling that vacuum? Islamists. Not just Muslims, but Islamists. And it's happening here. Unless God's people turn back to God's truth and not only believe it, but live it and proclaim it, 20 years from now, if God spares us, we would have a different conversation, unless God intervenes. And so I'm calling upon the believers, first of all, to take their prayer life seriously and gather in prayer and ask God to remember us with an awakening. But also I'm asking to be active. Know the truth, believe the truth, live the truth, and then proclaim the truth unashamedly. There's so many places now in the evangelical world who say, well, you know, we're not really sure if Jesus is the only way. 65%, according to Bono, of the millennialist Christians believe that there are other ways to God other than Jesus. Think about this. These are the future generation of Christian leaders. And it's very distressing if you allow it. But I know my God is a sovereign God and He's in control. I've read the last chapter of the book and we win. So I'm not worried, I'm not afraid, but I'm trying to ring the alarm bell.
All right. The bell is rung. Wrapping me, I could talk to you for a long time. But anyway, if you want more, the book is called The Hidden Enemy, and it's available in stores nationwide. And thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Gordon. God bless you.